for student council in 8th grade, I slaved for weekends on end, baking cupcakes for each of my classmates. And believe it or not, it's even harder to win a presidential race than it is to win a middle school student council election. Either you bake hundreds of millions of cupcakes, or you formulate an actionable platform that holds up to scrutiny. Elizabeth Warren's promise to cancel student debt the moment she stepped foot in the Oval Office seemed like a panacea for America's social and economic problems. However, with every inquiry into the mechanics and ethics of this policy, it starts to look more and more like a cupcake. Unfortunately, it isn't as easy as pressing the backspace button and deleting a few zeros. The American student loan crisis is symptomatic of larger systemic problems that can't be solved in one fell swoop. There are a lot of unanswered questions here. For example, is this a one-time action? If it isn't, then the government is essentially making higher education free, which may or may not be a good outcome, but either way couldn't be sustainably funded by any level of taxation that is currently acceptable in American political culture. On top of that, schools would likely just raise tuition because students would be more able to pay. Now, it could be argued that the potential economic benefits of this policy make it all worth it. But debt forgiveness is a clunky way to do that. Given Congress's recent foray into direct stimulus payments, it's difficult to argue for a policy that would hand most of the money to the people who probably need it the least. How can we justify giving a doctor with private medical school debt $50,000 when grocery store clerks are living paycheck to paycheck and state school graduates are barely scraping by? Not to mention, Warren proposed paying for this $1.25 trillion expenditure with a tax on less than 0.0003% of America's population. It's going to require borrowing that will not only increase the debt burden on America's future taxpayers, but will also depress current investment by raising the interest rate. Warren writes on her campaign website that 20 years after graduation, the average black student owes 18 and a half times what the average white student owes. And that is outrageous. But why is the solution a blanket debt forgiveness? First of all, if we're concerned about indebtedness in minority communities, why waste taxpayer dollars canceling white people's debt? Second, and more gravely, this policy is a band-aid for systemic racism, and not a particularly sticky one. The Brookings Institute reported that schools that serve majority-minority communities have fewer resources than mostly white schools in almost every case. Debt isn't the cause of a lack of access to quality education. It's the other way around. Underserved students go into debt because they're not taught about personal finance, because they're not taught how to write a scholarship essay, because they know they have to go to college to get a good job, but they're not taught well enough to fully reap the benefits. We must solve those problems. Otherwise, we'll be left forgiving debt and then turning around and offering a great rate to desperate students at inner city schools. I wish we could snap our fingers and make all of these issues disappear. That's why forgiving student debt seems so perfect. But when people need financial stability and gainful employment and a society that wants to see them succeed, a cupcake just isn't gonna cut it.